Hello and welcome to our recording on the lower motor neurons, motor units and their role in motor control. So the first thing we want to get straight is that we have motor units within our nervous system. Motor units consist of the alpha motor neuron and all of the muscles or muscle fibers that they innervate. And so you can see here in this picture, our alpha motor neuron comes down and it's not just in one area of a muscle, but interspersed within the whole muscle is the innervation of particular muscle fibers. And so when we're talking about the control of muscle action, we're obviously not talking about just the control of a single motor neuron and its associated muscle fibers, so the motor unit. We're also talking about this concept of the motor neuron pool. So if you imagine now you have hundreds or thousands of these alpha motor neurons and all of their fibers coming down to innervate all of these muscle fibers. That is termed the motor neuron pool. So motor neuron pool are all of the alpha motor neurons that innervate a whole muscle. So that the control of the motor neuron pool is what is largely going to dictate how we control muscle force. Of course, we are controlling the individual motor units within that pool, but it's the motor neuron pool in many instances that needs to be controlled. Now, when we talk about the motor neuron pool, it's not that they're all at one level of the spinal cord, so all of the alpha motor neurons are found at one level of the spinal cord. What we should be aware of is the fact that we have these what we call sort of motor nuclei, is the word I was looking for. These elongated motor nuclei. And so you can see that for this particular muscle itself, it's got several motor units that innervate in there, so the motor neuron pool. But those fibers are all arising from multiple levels of the spinal cord. And usually it's about 2 to 3, but there are some muscles that get all their innervation from one level of the spinal cord, not very often, up to about 4. But typically 2 to 3 levels at least of the spinal cord contribute to the control of a muscle or contribute to the motor neuron pool. This is essentially the basis of the control of actions. So the motor neuron, put the motor neurons together, we have motor neuron pool, and the motor neuron pool is distributed across multiple levels of the spinal cord itself. When we put that into context about our physiology of our muscle fibers, you might remember from your anatomy physiology days, slow twitch, intermediate twitch, and fast twitch fibers. Well, they correspond to the motor neuron that innervates those particular muscle fibers. So the muscle fibers actually change according to which motor units are in control of those muscle fibers. And so what we have are our slow fatigue resistant fibers. So they're those muscle fibers that we use for low forces for a long period of time. Then you have your intermediate fatigue resistant or your fast fatigue resistant, they're also known as. These ones allow a bit more force, generally a bit bigger in size in terms of a motor unit size, and are fatigue resistant in terms of able to produce a bit more force, but will decline in force capacity over a prolonged period of time, where generally slow won't. And then you have your biggest of all, your fast fatigable. And so these ones have huge twitch forces for a single motor unit. So this is depicting twitch forces, slow, very small twitch forces, because the muscle fibers themselves are quite small. The motor unit is quite small, which means that for every alpha motor neuron, it's only innervating a few muscle fibers. Fast fatigue resistant now have larger muscle fibers and larger motor units, which means that for an alpha motor neuron, there's more muscle fibers compared to slow. But our fast fatigable, they're quite large. They have those really large muscle fibers and really large motor units, so a large number of muscle fibers being innervated by a single alpha motor neuron. And so the force generating capacity of those is much higher. And you can see here that when we summate our action potentials for our alpha motor neurons, and we get what we call sort of an unfused tetanus, we have a force generating capacity in our slow twitch, which is quite low. But you'll see here that they contribute to only a small percentage of the maximum force. Sorry, I should rephrase. They are all activated, I should have said, during maximum force. And that's because of that principle of recruitment, Henneman's principle, whereby we recruit from smallest to largest. So when we're producing 100% of force, then all of our slow twitch fibers have been activated. And whether that is a powerful movement or a slow ramp up movement, what will end up happening is we recruit all of those small motor units, the slow fatigue resistant ones. Whereas with our intermediate or fast fatigue resistant, they then start to fatigue slowly over time, as you can see here. So at first, when we do 100% of our maximum force, all of them have been activated, but over time, and we're talking minutes here, we have a slow degradation in force generating capacity, because these fatigue resistant, they're not exactly going to always be able to function. So we have a slow ramping down. But if we compare that then to our fast fatigable, many of them are recruited at the very beginning, but quite rapidly, within 1 minute even, they then start to drop off, and by the 2 minute to the 4 minute, we've got very little of these fast fatigable motor units functioning. And so that that recruitment order, or size principle, I should say, and recruitment order according to that size principle, is one component of the control of muscle force and contraction. The other component is the frequency of the action potentials, so the firing frequency of our alpha motor neurons. So we know that with single muscle twitches, so 5 hertz frequency means that 5 times per second we're seeing a stimulus coming in and hitting that alpha motor neuron, and that's going down to the muscle, and it causes a twitch. At 5 hertz, typically what we're going to see in a motor unit is excitation, and then muscle contraction, and then a relaxation. And the frequency is too low to allow there to be any summation occurring. If we turn it up to 20 times per second, 20 hertz, then what we get is this temporal summation. And what happens is, before the muscle fibers can actually fully relax, we hit again with another stimulus. And so it ramps up again by the same amplitude. And then before it can relax, it comes in again. So what we're having is this temporal summation, a gradual summation of forces. Then if we come and look at unfused tetanus at about 80 hertz, it's different depending on particular motor units, but this is just a generalization and a way of illustrating the concept. At 80 hertz, 80 times per second, what's happening is that we recruit all the way up and we get to this plateau in force. So if we average the force across here, what we have is this wavering, unfused tetanus. And this wavering is that the frequency isn't high enough yet to stop any kind of relaxation. So we get a little bit of relaxation and then we hit again and we come back up. And so we get this wavering occurring. That's what we refer to as unfused tetanus. But in very high frequencies, firing frequencies of our alpha motor neurons, what we get is fused tetanus. And so this is firing so frequently that there's no opportunity for this motor unit to relax. And so it's gradually increasing the tension within it. And interestingly, when we think about firing frequency, it is in actual fact responsible for, in many muscles, that last 15 to 20% of force. So many muscles will reach their full motor unit recruitment. So we've recruited all motor units. We've recruited all the slow, the fast fatigue resistant, and the fast fatigable in a powerful movement. They might recruit all of them, and that occurs at, in some muscles, 60%, but in many it's like 80, 85% of the we've recruited all muscle, and we've only reached that 80, 85% of maximum. So how do we reach the 100%? Well, we increase firing frequency, and we get this fused tetanus that allows us to then get that last 20, 15, 10% out of the muscle. So it's quite interesting to see the different factors that contribute to the control of our muscles, and this is then going to have an influence on rate of force development, on the control of muscle contractions at a percentage of maximum. So they're the factors that contribute to our control, muscle contractions, and therefore the control of our motor system. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.